When my successful son Brandon invited me to live with him and his wife in their luxury condo in Charlotte, I thought I'd finally have the peaceful retirement I deserved. But every night at exactly 3 a.m., I'd hear the shower running. One night, curiosity got the better of me, and I discovered the horrifying truth about my perfect son. What I witnessed in that bathroom didn't just shatter my heart. It made me realize there were darker secrets hiding beneath his caring facade. Drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching this story unfold, and whether you think you would have had the courage to investigate those mysterious 3 a.m. sounds. The wrench slipped from my hands as the phone rang, cutting through the quiet of my garage. At 67, I'd grown comfortable with my small-town solitude, spending afternoons working on my old Chevy. Brandon's name on the caller ID made me smile. My son rarely called during work hours. "Hey there, son," I answered, wiping grease on my coveralls. "Dad, I've been thinking you should come live with us." The words caught me off guard. In 35 years of raising Brandon alone after his mother passed, he'd never made such a suggestion. "I'm worried about your health, Dad. Living alone at your age. What if something happens? What if you fall and nobody finds you?" His concern sounded genuine, though something felt rehearsed about his tone. "Son, I'm doing just fine." "Hold on, Dad. Hannah wants to talk." My daughter-in-law's sweet southern voice came through the line. "Hi, Dad Graham. We have this beautiful spare room with a city view. I could cook for you, and Brandon would feel so much better knowing you're safe with us." The way she called me Dad tugged at my heart. I'd missed having family around. Brandon returned to the phone. "It's our family duty, Dad. Mom would have wanted us to take care of each other." Invoking Sarah's memory sealed the deal. After an hour of gentle persuasion, I agreed to pack up my life. The following week blurred past with cardboard boxes and farewells. Mrs. Henderson brought a casserole in tears. "You're so lucky, Graham. Not everyone gets a son who cares this much." The 4-hour drive to Charlotte filled me with nervous excitement. The View Apartments towered 22 stories above uptown, all gleaming glass and steel. Brandon met me in the lobby, every inch the successful businessman in his tailored suit. "Welcome to your new home, Dad," he said, embracing me warmly. Hannah appeared in a yellow sundress, radiant and welcoming. "We're so excited you're here." Their apartment stunned me. Hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture worth more than I'd made in months at the factory. My room overlooked a small park, complete with a new television and comfortable reading chair. Dinner exceeded every expectation. Brandon shared stories from his latest business deals, eyes bright with ambition. Hannah served perfect roast beef, constantly checking if I needed anything, if the seasoning was right, if I was comfortable. "This promotion has been incredible, Dad," Brandon said, cutting his meat with precision. "Regional manager means I'm responsible for 7 states now. The company's expanding, and they're counting on me to deliver results." Hannah beamed at him. "He works so hard. Sometimes I barely see him before midnight." "Success requires sacrifice," Brandon replied, his tone carrying that familiar authority. "But it's worth it when you can provide for family." As I watched them together, my accomplished son and his devoted wife pride swelled in my chest. Brandon had built something remarkable here. That night, lying in the unfamiliar luxury, I felt contentment I hadn't known in years. My son honored his family, cared enough to bring his aging father into his successful world. The city lights twinkled beyond my window like promises of peaceful days ahead. I thought I'd finally found the peace I deserved. But this perfect new life was about to reveal its dark secrets. Morning sunlight streamed through my window as Hannah's humming drifted from the kitchen. Those first 7 days felt like a dream I'd never dared imagine. Brandon left before dawn each morning, returning after 8, with shoulders heavy from work, yet he always checked on me first. "How was your day, Dad? Did you eat enough?" His genuine concern warmed something that had been cold too long. Hannah proved everything I could hope for in a daughter-in-law. She prepared meals that rivaled the best restaurants: tender pot, roast homemade cornbread, sweet tea that tasted like childhood. The apartment sparkled under her care, and she moved through daily routines with graceful efficiency, always wearing that serene smile. "Dad Graham want to walk the gardens with me?" she'd ask after lunch. I discovered the View offered more than luxury, it provided community. During walks, I met retired couples who'd chosen Charlotte for their golden years. Robert from Tennessee, a former police officer who shared my love of classic cars. Margaret from Georgia, whose late husband worked construction. "You're fortunate," Margaret told me by the pool. "Not many young people understand family importance." Nights brought the deepest rest I'd known in years. No creaking floorboards or worrying about locked doors. Just gentle air conditioning and distant city sounds settling into sleep. That first weekend, Brandon took me shopping. "You need new clothes, Dad. Can't look like a small-town mechanic in upscale Charlotte." At the department store, he introduced me to colleagues. "This is my father. Finally convinced him to move in. You raised a good son," one coworker said. "Brandon talks about you constantly. Says you taught him everything about hard work and integrity." The praise validated 35 years of wondering if I'd done enough as a single parent. But as the second week began, subtle changes crept in like shadows at dusk. Hannah's morning humming grew quieter, sometimes absent. Dark circles appeared under her eyes despite early bedtimes. "Just tired, Dad, Graham. Sometimes I don't sleep well," she'd say when I asked her smile more fragile. Brandon's evening check-ins became shorter. His patience showed cracks when Hannah served dinner 5 minutes late, or I asked too many work questions. "Dad, I've had a long day. Can we talk later?" he'd say, rubbing his temples. Tuesday night of that second week, something jolted me awake. An unidentifiable sound had penetrated the walls. I lay listening, but heard only silence. My bedside clock read 2:30. The next morning, neither mentioned anything unusual. Hannah served breakfast with her customary smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. Brandon scrolled through emails, muttering about difficult clients and impossible deadlines. Hannah moved more carefully now, like someone afraid of making mistakes. When she accidentally dropped a spoon during lunch, she flinched before picking it up, glancing toward Brandon's empty chair as if he might materialize to witness her clumsiness. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" I asked. "Of course," she replied quickly. "Just clumsy today." But her hands trembled slightly as she continued clearing dishes. By the second week, I started noticing small things that didn't quite add up. The heat wave that hit Charlotte that week made everyone dress lighter, yet Hannah continued wrapping herself in long sleeves and high necklines. Even during our afternoon walks, when temperatures soared into the 90s, she'd emerge from her room covered from wrist to throat. "Aren't you burning up in that sweater, honey?" I asked one sweltering Tuesday. "Oh, the air conditioning makes me cold," she replied, tugging at her sleeves. "I'm always freezing indoors." But I'd noticed the apartment stayed at a comfortable 72 degrees. That morning I'd wandered into the kitchen early, hoping to help with breakfast preparation. Hannah stood at the sink washing dishes, her back to me, sleeves pushed up past her elbows for the first time since I'd arrived. Dark purple marks circled her left wrist like a twisted bracelet. The sound of my footsteps made her spin around, yanking her sleeves down so quickly she knocked over the soap dispenser. "Good morning, Dad Graham," she said, her voice pitched higher than usual. "You're up early." "Hannah, what happened to your arm?" Her eyes darted toward the hallway before returning to mine. "Oh, that I'm so clumsy lately. Yesterday I was carrying groceries and caught my wrist on the car door handle. You know how easily I bruise." The explanation sounded rehearsed, but her nervous smile discouraged further questions. Over the following days, I watched her move through the apartment, like someone navigating a minefield. She checked and double-checked everything: the temperature of Brandon's coffee, the seasoning in his food, the exact placement of his newspaper and reading glasses. When she vacuumed, she moved furniture back to precise positions, measuring distances with her eyes. Brandon's mood had shifted too. He'd returned from work with storm clouds gathering in his expression, offering no explanation for his obvious frustration. The easy conversation from our first week had evaporated. Thursday evening brought the worst dinner yet. Hannah had prepared Brandon's favorite grilled salmon with asparagus, but something about it triggered his displeasure. "This fish is overcooked," he announced, pushing his plate away. "How many times do I have to tell you? 8 minutes per side, no more." "I'm so sorry," Hannah whispered, her hands trembling as she reached for his plate. "I must have lost track of time. Let me make you something else." "Don't bother. I've lost my appetite." The silence stretched until I couldn't stand it anymore. "Tastes fine to me, son. Your wife's a wonderful cook." Brandon's head snapped up, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my stomach clench. For several heartbeats, nobody moved. Then his expression smoothed into something resembling normalcy. "Of course, Dad. I'm just tired. Long day at the office." But his tone carried an edge I'd never heard before. Hannah excused herself early, claiming a headache. I helped clear the table while Brandon disappeared into his home office, closing the door with more force than necessary. Around 11 that night, raised voices penetrated the walls between our rooms. The words remained indistinct, but the tone was unmistakable anger from one voice pleading from another. I pressed my ear to the wall, trying to make sense of the muffled conversation, but it ended abruptly. Friday morning, Hannah appeared for breakfast, wearing a turtleneck, despite the weather forecast predicting another scorcher. A red mark peeked above the collar near her jawline. "Mosquito bite," she explained before I could ask, touching the spot self-consciously. "They're terrible this year, but mosquitoes don't leave marks that look like fingerprints." Something was happening in this house after dark, and I was determined to find out what. The digital clock's green glow read exactly 3 in the morning when the sound of rushing water jolted me from sleep. Not the gentle flow of a bathroom faucet, but the powerful cascade of a shower running at full force. I lay still in the darkness, listening. The sound came from the master bathroom, separated from my room by a shared wall. After 15 minutes of steady flow, it stopped as abruptly as it had begun, leaving the apartment in complete silence. Sleep eluded me for the rest of the night. Who takes a shower at 3 in the morning? Was someone sick? Had there been an emergency I'd missed? At breakfast, I decided to ask directly. Brandon sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through emails on his phone, while Hannah prepared his usual scrambled eggs, wheat toast, black coffee. "Everything all right last night, son? I heard the shower running pretty late." Brandon's fingers paused over his phone screen. When he looked up, his expression held none of the warmth I'd grown accustomed to. "Work stress, Dad. Sometimes I can't sleep, so I take a cold shower to clear my head. Hope it didn't disturb you." "Oh, no trouble at all. Just wanted to make sure nobody was feeling poorly." Hannah remained silent throughout the exchange, her back turned as she worked at the stove. When she finally brought Brandon his plate, I noticed her hands weren't quite steady. "Maybe try some chamomile tea before bed," I suggested. "Your mother always said—" "I'm fine, Dad." Brandon's tone carried a finality that discouraged further conversation. The second night, 3 o'clock, brought the same torrential shower sounds. But this time, underneath the water's roar, I caught something else: voices. Muffled, indistinct, but definitely 2 people talking. The tone suggested disagreement, though I couldn't make out words. Again, 20 minutes of water, then sudden silence. The third night I lay awake from 2:30 onward, waiting. 3 o'clock came and went without a sound. Maybe Brandon had found another way to manage his stress. But the fourth night shattered any hope that the pattern had ended. The shower started precisely at 3, and this time the voices were clearer. One deeper, authoritative, another higher, pleading, and underneath it all a sound that made my chest tighten, quiet sobbing. I found myself sitting up in bed, straining to hear more. The crying was definitely female, soft and desperate, barely audible over the water. When everything went quiet 22 minutes later, I remained awake until dawn. Sleep became elusive. Each night I'd lie in bed from 2:30 onward, listening for sounds that might or might not come. Some nights brought the shower symphony. Others passed in merciful silence. The unpredictability made it worse somehow, like waiting for a storm that might never arrive. Brandon's explanation about work stress began to feel hollow. What kind of stress required such a specific, ritualistic response? And why did Hannah grow more withdrawn each day, her smiles becoming increasingly forced? During my morning walks with the neighbors, I found myself studying other apartments, wondering if anyone else heard unusual sounds at night. But the view's construction was solid, designed for privacy and quiet living. "You look tired, Graham," Margaret mentioned one afternoon by the pool. "Everything's settling in all right. Just adjusting to city sounds," I replied, not ready to voice my growing concerns. But lying awake that 5th night, listening to the familiar cascade begin at exactly 3 o'clock, I knew this wasn't about adjustment or city living. This was about something far more troubling happening just beyond my bedroom wall. I'd spent 30 years supervising workers. I knew the sound of trouble when I heard it. That night I positioned myself deliberately. At 2:58, I lay fully clothed, on top of my covers, every muscle tense with anticipation. Whatever was happening in this apartment, I was going to witness it firsthand. 3 o'clock arrived with mechanical precision. The shower roared to life, but this time, I was ready. Slipping from my bed, I moved through the darkened hallway with the careful steps of a man who'd spent decades walking factory floors without disturbing sleeping machinery. The apartment's layout worked in my favor. A long corridor connected all the bedrooms, and the master bathroom sat at the far end. As I drew closer, voices became distinct beneath the water's cascade. Brandon's tone carried authority and menace, while a higher voice pleaded in response. My heart hammered against my ribs as I approached the partially open door. What I saw through that narrow gap will haunt me until my dying day. Hannah stood beneath the shower's full force, fully clothed in her nightgown, the fabric clinging to her shivering frame. The water ran cold, I could tell from the way her whole body convulsed with each second under the stream. Brandon gripped her hair with one hand, holding her head back, forcing her to take the icy torrent directly in her face. "Next time you embarrass me in front of my father," he hissed, his voice barely audible over the water, "remember this feeling. Remember how helpless you are." Hannah's response was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Please, Brandon, I didn't mean—" "Shut up." His grip tightened. "You made me look bad when you dropped that plate at dinner. Like I can't provide a wife who has basic coordination." She'd dropped a plate I hadn't even noticed, but apparently that minor accident had warranted this torture. My first instinct screamed to burst through that door, to grab my son and throw him against the wall. But 30 years of managing dangerous situations had taught me the value of strategic thinking. If Brandon discovered me now in his current state of rage, what might he do to Hannah? What might he do to me? Hannah's legs gave out, and she would have collapsed if not for Brandon's grip on her hair. Her quiet sobs mixed with the water's roar, creating a symphony of suffering that cut through my soul like glass. "Are you going to be more careful?" Brandon demanded. "Yes," she gasped. "Yes, I promise." "Good, because next time it won't just be cold water." The threat hung in the air like poison. I backed away from the door, my legs trembling so violently I nearly stumbled. Somehow I made it to my room and closed the door silently behind me. I collapsed onto my bed, my mind reeling. The son I'd raised, the boy I'd taught to respect women, to protect those weaker than himself, had become a monster. Every principle I'd tried to instill in him had been twisted into something dark and cruel. Sleep was impossible. I lay there until dawn, my thoughts racing between horror and strategy. Confronting Brandon directly could escalate his violence. Calling police without evidence might make things worse for Hannah, but doing nothing meant being complicit in her suffering. By morning, one thing had crystallized in my mind. I couldn't save Hannah with righteous anger alone. I needed to be smarter than my son, more calculating than the predator he'd become. I had witnessed the unthinkable, and now I had to decide: confront him immediately, or find a smarter way to save Hannah. Breakfast felt like a performance I wasn't prepared to watch. Hannah moved around the kitchen with mechanical precision, her eyes puffy and red-rimmed, avoiding all eye contact as she prepared Brandon's usual meal. Every gesture seemed calculated to avoid drawing attention. Brandon, meanwhile, acted as if nothing had happened. He kissed Hannah's cheek when she served his coffee, complimented the perfectly scrambled eggs, and even asked about my plans for the day with what appeared to be genuine interest. "Dad, you should check out that new walking trail Margaret mentioned. Great exercise for someone your age." The casual normalcy of it made my stomach churn. How could he sit there sipping coffee and discussing walking trails 12 hours after torturing his wife in their bathroom? Hannah's hands trembled slightly as she buttered my toast, and I caught her wincing when she reached for the orange juice. Brandon noticed nothing, or pretended not to. After he left for work, the apartment fell into heavy silence. I sat at the kitchen island, wrestling with choices that felt impossible. Call the police immediately. With what evidence my word against a successful businessman's describing events I'd witnessed by spying through a bathroom door? Brandon would deny everything. Hannah might be too terrified to confirm my story, and then what he'd know I was on to him, and Hannah would pay the price for my interference. Confront Brandon directly. Demand he stop hurting his wife. That approach could backfire catastrophically. Men who abuse their partners don't respond well to challenges to their authority, especially from family members. I might provoke him into worse violence. Take Hannah and run an old man and a traumatized young woman fleeing with no resources. No plan, nowhere to go. Brandon had money connections, legal resources. He'd find us, and when he did, Hannah would suffer consequences I couldn't bear to imagine. Sarah's voice echoed in my memory from years past advice she'd given me during a particularly difficult decision at the factory. Think before you act, Graham. But don't think so long that you fail to act at all. The answer came to me gradually. Hannah needed to know she wasn't alone, that someone had witnessed Brandon's cruelty and believed her. But more than that, she needed to be part of any solution. This was her life, her choice to make. I could offer support, but I couldn't rescue her without her consent and cooperation. Throughout that day, I observed Brandon with new eyes. When he returned from work, he transformed back into the caring husband and devoted son. He brought Hannah flowers, just because, and spent 20 minutes asking about my day, listening with apparent fascination to my mundane activities. The performance was flawless. No wonder Hannah felt trapped. Who would believe that this charming, successful man was capable of such cruelty? He'd probably been perfecting this dual nature for years, maybe his entire adult life. I recognized the type from my factory days supervisors who could be your best friend in front of management and your worst enemy when no one was watching. Brandon had simply applied those manipulation skills to his marriage. That evening, as I listened to his animated discussion of a new client acquisition, I realized I was looking at a master manipulator, someone who understood exactly how to present different faces to different audiences, how to isolate his victim while maintaining his public image. My plan crystallized tomorrow. When Brandon left for work, I would approach Hannah carefully, gently. I would tell her what I'd seen, assure her that I believed her, and ask how I could help. Whatever she decided, I would support her decision. I knew what I had to do, but I had no idea how dangerous that conversation would become. The sound of running water led me to the kitchen where Hannah stood at the sink, washing dishes with the methodical movements of someone trying to stay busy. Her shoulders tensed when my footsteps approached. "Hannah, I need to talk to you about something important." She spun around, eyes wide, with the kind of panic I'd seen in factory workers who thought they were about to be fired. "Did I do something wrong? Is it about breakfast? I know the eggs were a little—" "No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong." I kept my voice gentle, the way I used to speak to Brandon when he was small and frightened. "I'm worried about you." Her hands gripped the dish towel so tightly her knuckles went white. "I don't understand. I saw what happened in the bathroom last night." The towel fell from her hands as her legs gave out. She sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her face crumpling as sobs shook her entire body. Not the quiet, suppressed crying I'd heard through the walls, but deep, wrenching sounds of someone who'd been holding back tears for far too long. "Please," she gasped between sobs. "Please don't tell him you know. He'll kill me. He's told me he'll kill me if anyone ever finds out." I knelt beside her chair, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Hannah, listen to me. I'm not here to make things worse. I'm here to help you." It took 20 minutes for her to calm down enough to speak coherently. The story that emerged made my blood run cold. 18 months of escalating abuse. Brandon's threats to destroy her reputation to make sure no one would ever believe her if she tried to leave. Financial control that left her with no resources of her own. "He says I'm stupid, that I can't survive without him," she whispered. "Maybe he's right. He's wrong about that, and about everything else. But we need evidence before we can act. We need to be smart about this." Hannah nodded, wiping her eyes. "Where can we talk safely? He has cameras in some rooms, and he checks my phone." "His office," I suggested. He'd never record himself. Brandon's home office was a shrine to his success awards on the walls. Expensive furniture, everything perfectly organized. Hannah moved nervously toward the window while I examined his desk, looking for anything that might help us understand his methods of control. What I found made my hands shake. Medical records with my name documenting early onset cognitive decline and inability to make sound financial decisions. A glossy brochure for Sunset Manor, one of Charlotte's most expensive nursing homes. Email drafts addressed to lawyers discussing guardianship proceedings and asset management. "Hannah, I called, my voice hoarse. Come look at this. She read over my shoulder, her face growing pale. Oh my God, he's been planning this since before you moved in. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The concerned phone calls about my health, the insistence that I needed care, the way he'd isolated me from my old life, making me dependent on his version of family. He doesn't just want to control you, I said, sinking into Brandon's leather chair. He wants to control both of us. Your freedom, my assets, everything. Hannah's hand found mine. We're both his victims. For the first time since I'd witnessed that horrible scene, I felt something other than helpless rage. I felt determination. Brandon had made a crucial mistake. He'd underestimated both of us. He saw Hannah as a weak woman he could break, and me as a confused old man he could manipulate. He was wrong on both counts. We're going to stop him, I said, squeezing Hannah's hand. But we have to be smarter than he is. Hannah straightened in her chair, and for the first time since I'd arrived, I saw steel in her eyes. What do we need to do? We weren't just fighting for Hannah's freedom anymore. We were fighting for both our lives. From the privacy of my bedroom, I dialed the number Hannah had found in the phone book. Robert Martinez, family law attorney, answered on the third ring. Mr. Martinez, I need help with a domestic violence situation, I said quietly, keeping my voice low, even though Brandon was at work. Are you in immediate danger, sir? Not me directly, but my daughter-in-law is. And there's financial elder abuse involved, too. His tone sharpened with professional interest. I can see you today if necessary. What evidence do you currently have? Eyewitness testimony to physical abuse and documents showing fraudulent medical records about my mental capacity. Good start. You'll need audio recordings, photographs of injuries, medical documentation, and written records of threats. Can you gather these safely? Over the next week, Hannah and I became careful conspirators. She purchased a small digital recorder with her grocery money, hiding it in her pocket during Brandon's increasingly frequent verbal attacks. The audio quality wasn't perfect, but it captured his threats clearly. You're worthless, his voice hissed through the tiny speaker during our review session. Nobody would want you if they knew how pathetic you really are. Hannah's response barely audible. I'm sorry, I'll try harder. You'd better. Because if you ever embarrass me again, you'll regret it. While Brandon worked, I photographed every document in his office. The fake medical evaluations, the nursing home brochures, email, correspondence with lawyers about guardianship proceedings. Each image went to our secure email account that Hannah had created using the library's computers. Look at this, Hannah whispered one afternoon, showing me a bank statement she'd found. He's been moving money from your accounts into his name. Small amounts, but consistently. The financial theft added another layer to our case. Martinez had been right. We needed comprehensive evidence of both crimes. 3 weeks into our evidence gathering, Hannah revealed the complication that changed everything. Graham, I need to tell you something. She sat across from me in the apartment's small library, hands folded protectively over her stomach. I'm pregnant. 8 weeks. My heart clenched. Does Brandon know? Not yet. I'm terrified to tell him. He's always said he doesn't want children, that they'd interfere with his career. The pregnancy added urgency to our timeline. Hannah couldn't endure much more abuse in her condition, and we couldn't risk Brandon discovering her secret before we were ready to act. Martinez helped us contact Safe Harbor Charlotte's women's shelter, arranging a bed for Hannah when the time came. We also alerted Detective Tom Bradley at Charlotte PD, giving him advance notice of the domestic violence situation without revealing our specific timeline. When you're ready to act, call immediately, Bradley advised. Don't wait. Don't give him time to destroy evidence or hurt anyone. I spent hours at the library researching my legal rights and gathering medical records, proving my mental competency. Dr. Williams, my physician back home, provided written testimony that I'd never shown signs of cognitive decline. Hannah practiced her escape route from the apartment to the parking garage, then to Safe Harbor. We rehearsed what she'd say to Brandon when she asked for the divorce, how she'd get out safely if he became violent. Friday. Martinez confirmed during our final phone consultation. Serve him with papers on Friday evening. Hannah, you leave immediately afterward. Graham, you call 911 the moment things escalate. Our evidence filled an entire digital folder. Dozens of audio files, photographs of documents and injuries, medical records, financial statements showing theft, and witness testimony from neighbors who'd heard arguments through the walls. Friday arrived with unseasonable warmth. Hannah moved through the apartment like someone preparing for battle, checking her emergency bag one final time. I reviewed our contact numbers, Martinez Detective Bradley Safe Harbor 911. We had our evidence and our plan, but we couldn't predict how far Brandon would go to keep his secrets. Friday evening arrived with the weight of inevitability. Hannah had spent the day moving through her routines, like someone preparing for surgery, necessary but terrifying. When Brandon walked through the door at 6:30, she was waiting in the living room, divorce papers in her trembling hands. "Brandon, I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air like a lit fuse. For a heartbeat, Brandon stood frozen briefcase still in his grip. Then his face transformed into something I'd never seen before, pure, uncontrolled rage. "You what?" His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "I said I want—" His hand struck her cheek with a crack that echoed through the apartment. Hannah stumbled backward, papers scattering across the hardwood floor. "That's enough!" I shouted, rising from my chair. "I'm calling 911. Brandon whirled toward me, his eyes wild. "Nobody's calling anybody. This is my house, my wife, my business." But as I reached for my phone, the sound of footsteps thundered up the stairwell. Detective Bradley and 3 uniformed officers burst through the door we'd left unlocked, weapons drawn. "Charlotte PD, step away from her." Brandon's face went from rage to confusion to dawning horror as the officers surrounded him. "What is this, Dad? What did you do?" "I protected an innocent woman," I said as they cuffed him. "Something you should have learned to do." The paramedics arrived minutes later, checking Hannah's injuries while I gave my statement. As they loaded Brandon into the patrol car, he looked back at me through the window, with eyes full of hatred and disbelief. 3 months later, the Charlotte County Courthouse became the stage for justice. Martinez presented our evidence methodically: audio recordings of threats, photographs of injuries, financial documents showing theft, and my eyewitness testimony of the bathroom abuse. The prosecution revealed Brandon's complete scheme: fake medical records, nursing home arrangements, guardianship papers, and systematic theft of my assets. He'd planned to have me declared incompetent within 6 months, gaining control of my life savings while keeping Hannah trapped through fear and isolation. Judge Patricia Williams showed no mercy. "Mr. Brandon Mitchell, you have violated the trust of both your wife and your father in the most heinous ways possible. This court sentences you to 5 years in state prison with a permanent restraining order against both victims and full financial restitution." Hannah received full custody of our unborn child and all marital assets. Brandon's lawyer's attempts to claim his innocence crumbled under the weight of evidence. 6 months after that terrible Friday night, I moved into a cozy 1-bedroom apartment just 3 blocks from Hannah's new home. She'd used her settlement to buy a small house with a garden far from the luxury tower that had been her prison. Emma arrived on a sunny Tuesday morning in March, 7 pounds of perfect health and her mother's gentle spirit. As I held my granddaughter for the first time, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, I felt a completeness I hadn't known was missing. "Thank you," Hannah whispered from her hospital bed, "for everything. Thank you for being brave enough to fight back. Standing up to family members is the hardest thing you'll ever do, but protecting innocent people is always worth the pain. Real men don't use power to control, they use it to protect." Today, as Emma takes her first steps in Hannah's garden while I watch from my favorite chair, I understand something fundamental about family. Sometimes losing a son means gaining a real family, one built on love, respect, and the courage to do what's right. Looking back on this journey, I've learned that betrayal stories like mine teach us the hardest truths about family. Sometimes the people we love most are capable of the greatest cruelty. But God works through the darkest moments, showing us that real strength isn't about blood relations, it's about standing up for what's right. These grandpa stories remind me that age doesn't make us powerless. At 67, I discovered I still had the courage to fight battles I never imagined facing. When I see other betrayal stories in the news, I think about Hannah and Emma, and I know that speaking up was worth every painful moment. God gave me the wisdom to recognize the signs, the strength to gather evidence, and the determination to see justice through. Many grandpa stories end with isolation and regret, but mine became about redemption and new beginnings. Sometimes God asks us to make the hardest choice, choosing righteousness over family loyalty. The most profound betrayal stories aren't just about the pain inflicted, but about the healing that follows. Today, watching Emma play in her mother's garden, I see God's grace in action. He turned our suffering into strength, our fear into freedom. If my story resonates with you, please don't stay silent. Share this video with someone who might need hope. Leave a comment about your own experiences and subscribe to our channel for more stories that matter. Sometimes one person's courage to speak up can save another's life. Together we can break the cycle of silence that protects abusers and abandons victims. At our family Christmas dinner, my son looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're here because it's your house? But that doesn't mean you're welcome here anymore." The words hit like a sledgehammer. After decades of building this family, this home, this life, I was being thrown away like trash. What broke my heart even more was watching my wife Beverly sit in complete silence, refusing to defend me when I needed her most. They thought they were dealing with a broken, isolated old man with nowhere to turn. They had no idea what was coming next. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment below and let me know where are you watching this story from, because what my family did to me that Christmas night might be happening to someone in your town right now. The smell of sage stuffing filled our home as I finished preparing what would become the most devastating Thanksgiving of my 67 years. I'd been up since 5 that morning, just like I had for 38 straight years, preparing every dish myself, the herb-rubbed, turkey-whipped potatoes, and green bean casserole that had become our family tradition. Connor arrived with Courtney as daylight faded. My 35-year-old son moved stiffly through our front door worry lines, creasing his face. His wife followed her manicured fingers, already reaching for her phone. At 32, Courtney carried herself with the polished confidence of Cleveland's real estate market. But tonight, her charm felt mechanical. "Everything looks wonderful, Franklin," Beverly said, though her voice trembled slightly. My wife seemed unusually nervous as we settled around the table. I carved the turkey with methodical precision. Conversation started normally, but tension crackled beneath every exchange. "Connor, how's the consulting business?" I asked, reaching for gravy. "You mentioned some new clients last time we talked." "Dad, don't worry about it," Connor replied curtly, not looking up from his plate. "I'm just interested in—" "Seriously, it's fine. You don't need to keep track of everything I do." The sharpness caught me off guard. I wasn't keeping track. I was making conversation. Courtney looked up from her phone. "Franklin, maybe Connor doesn't want to discuss work during family dinner. Since when is asking about my son's career inappropriate?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Since it becomes constant questioning," Connor muttered. "Constant questioning, son?" I asked one question. Connor set down his fork with a deliberate clink. When he looked up, his eyes held a coldness I'd never seen before. "Dad," he said with a flat, rehearsed tone, "you're here because it's your house, but that doesn't mean you're welcome here anymore." The words struck me like a physical blow. My chest tightened as I struggled to process what I'd heard. "What did you say?" I whispered. "You heard me," Connor continued, never breaking eye contact. "Things need to change. We can't keep pretending everything's normal when it's not." "What's not normal?" I asked. "About your job." "It's not just that, Dad. It's everything. The constant prying, the way you insert yourself into every conversation, the way you make everyone uncomfortable." "Make everyone uncomfortable?" My voice rose. "This is Thanksgiving dinner. I'm trying to talk to my family." "See, you can't even accept feedback without getting defensive and loud," Courtney interjected with practiced patience. "This is exactly what Connor and I have been discussing." I turned to Beverly, expecting her to defend me, to tell them they were being cruel and ridiculous. Instead, she stared at her untouched plate hands, folded tightly in her lap, saying nothing. "You're always questioning, always needing to control every situation," Connor added. "It's exhausting to be around." "Control, I asked one question about your business. And there it is again, you can't hear yourself?" Courtney said, shaking her head. "You're being argumentative right now, proving our point." "It's not personal, Franklin," she continued with that practiced sympathy. "We just need some space. Some boundaries until you can work on being less overwhelming." The room spun as I tried to understand how our family tradition had become an ambush, how asking about Connor's work had escalated into a character assassination. Connor and Courtney left immediately after that, barely touching Beverly's pumpkin pie. They mumbled excuses about early meetings, but their departure felt like an escape mission accomplished. I sat staring at our half-eaten feast. Beverly moved like a ghost, clearing plates in mechanical silence, avoiding my eyes as she scraped food into containers. That's when I realized this hadn't been spontaneous. The careful timing Courtney's prepared remarks. Beverly's guilty silence, everything pointed to coordination and planning. But as I watched my wife's hand shake while handling our dishes, I couldn't tell whether those tremors came from guilt over betraying me or fear of what might come next. Sleep refused to come that night. I lay staring at the ceiling, replaying every word from dinner, every gesture that had passed between Connor Courtney and Beverly. The digital clock mocked me, 2 a.m., then 3, then 4, as my mind churned through possibilities I didn't want to consider. Finally giving up, I made my way to my study, the same room where I'd built my manufacturing business from the ground up. This desk had seen me through contract negotiations and strategic planning that turned a small Cleveland factory into a regional powerhouse. If I could navigate corporate warfare, surely I could figure out what was happening in my own family. But something about Connor's words kept nagging at me. That devastating line about not being welcome, it hadn't sounded spontaneous. There was a rehearsed quality, like he'd practiced the phrasing, and Courtney's responses had been too smooth, too prepared. In business, I'd learned to recognize when someone was reading from a script. What had I actually done wrong? I'd asked about his consulting business, a normal parental question. Where was the controlling behavior they'd accused me of? The more I analyzed the evening, the more it felt like I'd walked into a trap. Morning brought no clarity, only Beverly moving around the kitchen with unusual urgency. I found her clutching a coffee mug, eyes red-rimmed, and avoiding mine. Beverly, we need to talk about last night. Her shoulders sagged. Franklin, What the hell just happened at our dinner table? She started crying, then quiet tears from somewhere deep and painful. Connor's been calling me for weeks. Almost every day when you go for your morning walks. My chest tightened. Calling about what? About you, she whispered, finally meeting my eyes. He says you're losing your mental sharpness, making poor financial decisions. He keeps telling me we need to protect you from yourself. What poor financial decisions? The investment account you opened last month. He said it was risky for your age. The way you've been reorganizing files, moving things around. He said those were warning signs. I stared at her. The investment account was a conservative bond fund. The file reorganization was because I'd bought a new cabinet. Beverly, those aren't warning signs of anything except normal life management. I know, but Connor sounded so concerned, so knowledgeable. He kept saying, Mom, we can't wait until it's too late. We have to act while Dad can still understand what's best for him. The manipulation was breathtaking. Connor had been systematically undermining my credibility, with my own wife turning normal activities into evidence of decline. And you believed him? I didn't want to, but he's our son, Franklin. He's a financial consultant. I thought maybe he could see things I couldn't. I felt so torn between you and him. Classic divide and conquer strategy. Make Beverly doubt her judgment, position himself as the expert, create a crisis requiring immediate action. I'd seen similar tactics in corporate boardrooms. Beverly, look at me. Do I seem mentally impaired right now? In this conversation, do I sound confused or incompetent? She shook her head slowly. No, you sound exactly like yourself. Sharp and analytical, just like always. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I was going to approach this like any business crisis. Gather intelligence, identify the real players, understand their motivations, develop a counter-strategy. I spent the morning systematically reviewing recent months, checking my calendar against memory. Connor's visits had increased in frequency, and Beverly had found excuses to give us privacy during each one. What had seemed like thoughtful behavior now looked like orchestrated opportunity. Then I went to check the mail and discovered our monthly bank statement was missing. I always kept financial documents meticulously organized in the same filing system I'd used for decades. Every statement, every investment summary had its place. But as I searched through the files, a cold realization settled over me. Someone had been going through my personal papers, and they'd been careful enough to cover their tracks almost. The next morning, I approached my filing cabinet like a crime scene investigator. What I'd initially dismissed as a missing bank statement turned out to be the tip of an iceberg that chilled me to the bone. 3 months' worth of bank statements had vanished entirely. Insurance policies and property deeds showed subtle signs of photocopying slight misalignments and paper texture changes that only someone with my obsessive organizational habits would notice. The timeline was damning. Every missing document corresponded exactly with Connor's increased visits to our house. When I confronted Beverly about the missing papers, she seemed genuinely confused. "Franklin, I never touch your files. You know how particular you are about your system." Her bewilderment appeared authentic, which meant someone else had been systematically harvesting my financial information while she remained oblivious. I needed professional confirmation of what I suspected, so I drove to First National Bank to meet with Jim Morrison, a man I'd done business with for 15 years. Jim's discomfort was obvious the moment I mentioned potential unauthorized access to my accounts. "Franklin," he said, loosening his tie, "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but someone did request information about your accounts last month. They had what appeared to be a valid power of attorney document." My blood pressure spiked. I never signed any power of attorney. The signature matched our records perfectly. We ran it through our verification system twice. Jim pulled up the digital file on his computer. The inquiry was specifically about account balances and asset valuations, not transaction history, just current worth. "Who made the request?" "Your son Connor, accompanied by a woman. Not your daughter-in-law, though. Someone we didn't recognize. Blonde, professional looking, carried herself like a lawyer or real estate agent." The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Connor hadn't been acting alone, and this mysterious woman suggested a level of premeditation that went far beyond family concern. "Jim, I need copies of everything related to that inquiry, and I need you to flag my accounts for any future access attempts." "Already done, Franklin." Something felt off about the whole interaction. My next call was to Margaret Thompson, our family attorney for the past decade. Margaret's revelation hit me like a sledgehammer. "Franklin, someone called my office 3 weeks ago asking detailed questions about your will and estate planning. The caller claimed to be a family representative, concerned about your capacity to make sound financial decisions." "What did you tell them?" "Nothing, of course. I explained that I couldn't discuss your affairs without your explicit consent. But they were persistent, asking about procedures for updating beneficiaries and the timeline for probate proceedings. The audacity was breathtaking. They weren't just planning to take control of my assets, they were researching what would happen after I died." "Margaret, I need you to run a check on something else. Has anyone been consulting with elder law attorneys about guardianship procedures for someone matching my profile?" 20 minutes later, Margaret called back with information that made my hands shake. "Franklin, I contacted my colleague Rodriguez, who specializes in guardianship law. He confirms that someone matching Connor's description consulted with him about initiating proceedings for an elderly parent with declining judgment and increasing financial vulnerability. The systematic nature of their campaign was becoming undeniable. Forged power of attorney documents to access my financial information, legal consultations about stripping away my autonomy, missing financial records that would be crucial evidence of my competency. This wasn't spontaneous concern from a loving family. This was a carefully orchestrated assault on my independence. I sat in my car outside Margaret's office, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd uncovered. 3 months of methodical preparation, professional assistance from unknown accomplices, legal research into the most efficient ways to declare me incompetent. But the most chilling discovery was yet to come. Searching through Beverly's purse for aspirin that evening, something I'd done countless times during our marriage, I found an appointment card that stopped my heart cold. Dr. Marcus Webb, geriatric specialist, scheduled for the following week. An appointment I had never made for an evaluation I had never requested, with a doctor I had never heard of. The trap was closing around me and I was running out of time. The first thing I did the next morning was call Dr. Marcus Webb's office. The receptionist's cheerful voice confirmed my worst suspicions. "Oh yes, Mr. Sinclair. Your appointment is scheduled for Tuesday at 10 a.m. for a cognitive assessment. Your daughter-in-law Courtney was so thoughtful to arrange this, mentioning her concerns about your recent memory issues. Memory issues I didn't have, arranged by someone with no legal right to schedule my medical evaluations. I'm calling to cancel that appointment. I never requested any cognitive assessment. But Sir Mrs. Sinclair explained that you'd been having episodes of confusion. There are no episodes of confusion, and I'm canceling immediately. This wasn't just family manipulation anymore. Someone was building a medical case for my incompetency using fabricated symptoms. I needed professional help to understand what I was facing. Marcus Torres came recommended through my manufacturing network, a former FBI agent specializing in financial crimes. When I explained the situation in his downtown Cleveland office, his expression grew grim. Mr. Sinclair, what you're describing fits a pattern I've seen in elder financial abuse cases. Let me run a comprehensive background check on your daughter-in-law. 3 days later, Torres called with information that left me speechless. Franklin Courtney owes $275,000 from a failed commercial real estate investment. She borrowed from private lenders, not banks, which means higher interest rates and aggressive collection methods. My hands gripped the phone tighter. Does Connor know? Nothing. She's hidden the entire crisis from him. The investment failed 18 months ago, but she's been covering it up ever since. Payments are due January 25th, which explains the Thanksgiving urgency. That timeline hit me hard. 18 months ago, Connor and Courtney had just celebrated their second wedding anniversary. She'd been lying to my son about her financial situation for most of their marriage. Her current real estate income barely covers basic expenses. Torres continued. She's been juggling minimum payments and dodging creditor calls. Franklin, this woman is desperate. But Torres wasn't finished. There's more disturbing news. I found records showing Courtney worked with elderly clients in Phoenix, Arizona, before coming to Cleveland 4 years ago. Multiple complaints were filed with the state real estate board. 4 years. She'd been in Cleveland for 4 years, which meant she'd spent 2 years establishing herself in our community, gaining our trust before marrying Connor. The calculation was chilling. What kind of complaints? I asked. Elderly homeowners reported that Courtney obtained copies of their bank statements, insurance policies, and property valuations without permission. She claimed it was for market analysis, but clients felt she was overstepping boundaries. The Arizona Real Estate Commission opened an investigation. What happened? She left the state suddenly, right before the investigation concluded. Moved to Cleveland, changed her references, started fresh. Some references I called don't even remember her. Now I understood why Connor had met her so soon after she arrived in Cleveland. She'd been looking for a new identity, a fresh start, and my successful son had been the perfect cover story. Torres, how long has she been planning this operation against me? 6 months. Franklin, I found evidence Courtney's been researching Pennsylvania guardianship laws since summer, long before Connor knew about your supposed mental decline. She downloaded legal forms, researched precedent cases, even contacted elder law attorneys. The timeline was becoming crystal clear. Courtney had spent 2 years building credibility in Cleveland, 2 years married to Connor, gaining access to our family, and 6 months systematically planning to destroy my independence. She's not opportunistic, Torres concluded. She's a professional predator who targets elderly people and their families. She came to Cleveland specifically to reinvent herself, and marrying Connor gave her the perfect cover. As I hung up, I realized my son had been manipulated from the very beginning. Courtney hadn't fallen in love with Connor. She'd selected him as her pathway into a financially stable family with vulnerable elderly parents. The question now was whether I could save Connor before Courtney's desperation drove her to even more extreme measures. Armed with Torres's devastating report, I knew I needed legal armor. My first call was to Sebastian Martinez, an attorney specializing in elder abuse prevention. Mr. Sinclair, what you're facing is a sophisticated financial predator. We need multiple layers of protection immediately. Within 48 hours, Martinez arranged a comprehensive mental competency evaluation with Dr. Patricia Williams. The 3-hour assessment covered memory recall to complex problem solving. The results were unequivocal. Franklin, your cognitive function scores significantly above average for your age group, Dr. Williams explained. You show no signs of dementia or impaired judgment. Any court would recognize your complete mental competency. Martinez used those results to file preemptive legal motions preventing guardianship abuse. We're creating an irrevocable trust structure, making it virtually impossible for anyone to access your assets, even with a temporary guardianship order. I implemented digital fortress protocols, changing every password, adding two-factor authentication, creating detailed documentation of daily activities. Every conversation with Taurus, every legal consultation was meticulously recorded. But the most crucial discovery was unplanned. While installing a security camera system Martinez had recommended, I found a small recording device hidden behind our kitchen coffee maker. Had Connor planted surveillance in my own home? When Beverly returned from book club that evening, I confronted her. "Beverly, what is this?" I demanded, holding up the tiny recorder. Instead of guilty denial, she smiled, actually smiled for the first time in weeks. "Franklin," she said, settling into her chair, "I've been married to you for 42 years. Did you really think I would betray you?" The world tilted. "What are you talking about?" "I've been recording Connor's phone calls for 3 weeks. Every manipulative conversation, every coaching session with Courtney, every lie about your mental state." My mouth fell open. "You've been... What?" Beverly returned with a digital recorder and notebook, filled with dates and times. "Listen to this." Connor's voice filled our living room. "Mom, you have to stick to the script. When Dad asks questions, seem worried about his memory. Courtney says it's crucial you appear concerned about his decision-making." Then Courtney's voice sharp and calculating. "Beverly, this only works if Franklin thinks he's losing you too. You have to seem conflicted, forced to choose sides." I stared at Beverly in amazement. "How long have you known?" "Since the second phone call." Connor sounded wrong, rehearsed like someone was feeding him lines. "So I started recording everything. I have hours of evidence, Franklin. Courtney coaching Connor, discussing asset seizure timelines, even laughing about fooling the old man. The relief was overwhelming. My wife had been playing confused, manipulated spouse, while secretly gathering evidence to destroy their conspiracy. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Because I needed them to think it was working. If they suspected I was on to them, they might have changed tactics, or disappeared. This way, we have everything on tape." We spent an hour listening to recordings documenting the entire conspiracy. Courtney's desperation about debts, Connor's growing discomfort with deception, fake medical appointments, forged documents, even discussions about what to do if I became suspicious. "Beverly, you've been conducting your own investigation this whole time." 42 years of marriage taught me strategy too," she said with a wry smile. The recordings revealed Courtney's manipulation in devastating detail. Her coaching Connor on emotional pressure tactics, her research into Pennsylvania guardianship laws, her timeline for liquidating my assets, even her backup plans if I proved more difficult than expected. Most chilling was a conversation where Courtney discussed the corrupt doctor she'd found someone willing to sign competency evaluations without proper examination for the right price. "Beverly," I said, taking her hands, "you've saved us." "We're not done yet," she replied. "Courtney scheduled another medical evaluation for you next week, with a different doctor, one she claims will be more understanding of the family's concerns." As we planned our next moves together, I realized the tables had completely turned. Courtney and Connor thought they were closing in on a confused old man and his manipulated wife. Instead, they were walking into an ambush, orchestrated by two people they'd underestimated entirely. The trap was set, and we held all the cards. Beverly proved to be a natural actress. The next morning, she called Connor with panic in her voice. "Connor, I'm worried about your father. He's asking strange questions, acting suspicious. He keeps asking about phone calls and medical appointments I don't know anything about." I could hear Connor's sharp breath through the phone. "What kind of questions?" "He wanted to know if anyone had been through his files. He seemed confused about missing bank statements." "Connor, I think he's getting paranoid. I'll be right over. Keep him calm until I get there." We'd positioned recording equipment throughout the living room, hidden behind picture frames. This conversation would be documented from multiple angles. Connor arrived within 30 minutes, looking haggard and desperate. His appearance was disheveled, wrinkled shirt, unshaven face, the look of a man who hadn't slept in days. "Mom, where's Dad?" "Right here, son." I said, entering with coffee, playing the slightly confused elderly man. Connor Beverly said you wanted to talk. Dad Mom mentioned you've been asking questions. I think maybe you're getting mixed up about some details. I sat down heavily, adopting a puzzled expression. Mixed up, I just noticed some papers missing. Bank statements, insurance documents. Do you know anything about that? Connor's eyes darted to Beverly, who nodded encouragingly. Dad, sometimes when people get older, they misplace things and don't remember. But I'm very organized with my files. I know, but Courtney and I have been worried about some decisions you've been making. The way you've been handling finances, things you've said. I leaned forward, confused. What things? What's wrong with my finances? That's when the dam broke. Connor, thinking he was talking to someone whose memory couldn't be trusted, began revealing everything. Dad, you signed some documents a few weeks ago. A power of attorney giving me access to help manage your accounts. You probably don't remember, but you were having trouble understanding the paperwork. I signed a power of attorney. Courtney showed me how to... She helped me make sure your signature was correct because your handwriting has been shaky. Beverly gasped softly. Connor, what are you saying? Mom, we're trying to protect him. The guardianship petition will be filed next week. Then we can manage Dad's assets properly. Everything will be liquidated by February. Guardianship petition, I repeated as if hearing it for the first time. Connor's voice cracked with emotion. Dad, I know this sounds terrible, but Courtney says it's the only way to protect you from yourself. You've been making poor decisions, getting confused about money. We can't wait until something catastrophic happens. The manipulation was heartbreaking. My son genuinely believed he was saving me. Connor, do I seem confused right now? In this conversation, he looked uncertain. Well, no, but Courtney says people with your condition have good days and bad days. Today might be a good day. That's when I made my move. Son, what if I told you Courtney owes $275,000 to private lenders? What if she's been lying about her business success? Color drained from Connor's face. That's impossible. Her real estate business is thriving. She just closed 3 major deals. I showed him Torres's report, watching his world crumble with each page. The failed investments, Arizona complaints, systematic guardianship research. She told me her business was growing, he whispered. She said we were building a future together. Connor, your wife, has been using you to get to me. This was never about protecting me. It was about saving herself from bankruptcy. My son broke down, completely sobbing as he realized the woman he'd married had manipulated him into betraying his father. Dad, how could I have been so stupid? I thought I was helping you, but I was destroying our family. You were manipulated by a professional, Connor. She's done this before. The creditors have been calling me too. He admitted through tears. I didn't understand why her business debts were my problem. She kept saying it was temporary, that your assets would solve everything. She's been planning this for 6 months, son, long before she convinced you I was declining. Connor looked up with red, swollen eyes. Dad, I need to get away from her. But I'm scared of what she might do if she realizes I know the truth. With Connor safely in our guest bedroom and Beverly's recordings as ammunition, I launched the most comprehensive campaign of my life, systematically destroying someone who'd threatened my family. My first target was Courtney's financial lifeline. Using Torres's intelligence about her creditors, I contacted each lender personally. Mr. Rodriguez. I told her primary creditor, I'm Franklin Sinclair, and Courtney has no legal access to my assets. The documents she's shown you are forgeries, and I have police reports to prove it. The effect was immediate. Rodriguez and other lenders froze Courtney's remaining credit lines and demanded immediate payment. Her precarious financial situation became full-scale collapse. Next, I contacted the Pennsylvania Real Estate Commission with detailed complaints, backed by Torres's evidence of Arizona violations and current fraud. Professional licensing boards take elder abuse seriously. Courtney's license was suspended pending investigation. Meanwhile, Martinez executed the legal assault. Criminal complaints were filed, elder abuse, forgery, conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft. The evidence package included Beverly's recordings, Torres's investigation bank records, and medical documentation of my competency. Franklin, this is one of the most comprehensive elder abuse cases I've ever seen, Martinez told me. The prosecution will have everything needed for multiple felony convictions. I reached out to other elderly clients Courtney had worked with, sharing Torres's findings about her Arizona history. 3 additional complaints were filed within days, revealing a predatory pattern. The most satisfying call was to Courtney's broker, Patricia Henderson, a woman I'd known through Cleveland business circles. Patricia, one of your agents has been systematically defrauding my family and potentially other elderly clients, I said, providing evidence copies. Within 24 hours, Courtney was terminated from Henderson Realty, her professional reputation completely destroyed. The pressure campaign worked perfectly. Courtney made increasingly desperate moves, providing more evidence. She attempted accessing my accounts with additional forged documents, not knowing Jim Morrison was flagging every inquiry. She tried emotional manipulation on Beverly appearing at our house with tears. Beverly, you have to understand, I was just trying to help the family plan for the future. Courtney pleaded at our door. Franklin is getting older, and someone needs to look out for his interests. Beverly, confident in her role, recorded everything. Courtney Franklin seems perfectly capable of managing his affairs. Maybe focus on your own financial problems. Courtney's shock when Beverly revealed she knew about the debts was priceless. She realized her carefully constructed lies were unraveling completely. Courtney's final desperate gambit was pressuring Connor to return home and fix this misunderstanding. She called repeatedly, sent threatening texts, even appeared at his workplace. She's becoming unhinged, Connor told us after one disturbing encounter. She accused me of betraying her, said I'd destroyed her life. When I mentioned Arizona, she got scary, said she'd make sure I regretted crossing her. That threat was the final evidence we needed. Martinez immediately filed for a restraining order and alerted police about threats against family members. The end came swiftly. Detective Sarah Walsh from Cleveland Police Financial Crimes Unit had been building the case for 2 weeks. They found Courtney at her former office, apparently trying to convince Patricia Henderson to give her another chance. Courtney Sinclair. Detective Walsh announced entering the conference room where Courtney was pleading her case. You're under arrest for elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and making terroristic threats. The arrest was witnessed by 6 real estate professionals who'd known Courtney as successful. Watching her led away in handcuffs, her professional facade finally stripped away, provided unexpected satisfaction. Connor watched news coverage that evening with mixed relief and sadness. Dad, I can't believe I was married to someone capable of this. How did I not see who she really was? She's a professional manipulator, son. Her job was making sure you didn't see the truth. As we sat in our living room, the same room where this nightmare had begun at Thanksgiving, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, complete peace. The woman who'd tried to destroy our family was behind bars, my son was home and healing, and Beverly and I had discovered we made a formidable team. The war was over and we'd won. The courtroom was packed 6 months later when Judge Patricia Morrison delivered Courtney's sentence. The case had attracted attention throughout Pennsylvania as sophisticated elder abuse. Mrs. Sinclair, Judge Morrison said, looking down with obvious disgust, you systematically targeted and manipulated an elderly man and his family for financial gain. This court sentences you to 24 months in state prison, followed by 3 years probation. The judge continued, this case will serve as precedent for how Pennsylvania handles elder financial abuse. The evidence, including recorded confessions and documented forgery, demonstrates your calculated crimes. Courtney was ordered to pay full restitution for legal fees and damages. Connor's divorce was finalized within weeks, made simple by her criminal conviction. The real healing took longer. Connor rented an apartment 10 minutes away, close enough to rebuild our relationship, but far enough for independence. We started family therapy with Dr. Elizabeth Harper, who specialized in manipulation recovery. Connor was as much a victim as you were Franklin, Dr. Harper explained. Courtney used sophisticated psychological techniques that would fool most people. Therapy helped Connor recognize warning signs he'd missed, how Courtney had isolated him from questioning friends, how she'd gradually made him doubt his judgment while positioning herself as the expert. Dad, she convinced me that questioning your mental state showed love and concern, Connor admitted. I thought I was being responsible. Beverly's secret investigation became family pride. Dr. Harper called her an intuitive investigator who trusted instincts over manipulation. Our marriage grew stronger through crisis. Working against a common threat reminded us why we'd fallen in love 42 years earlier. Beverly's intelligence and courage had literally saved our family's future. Connor found new work with a Cleveland firm specializing in fraud prevention, ironic but fitting. His manipulation experience gave him unique insights into how financial predators operate. Thanksgiving 2025 felt like stepping into an alternate universe. Same dining room, same table, but everything had changed. Connor arrived with homemade apple pie, chatting enthusiastically about work. Beverly and I exchanged knowing glances, watching our son's genuine happiness. Dad let me help with the turkey this year, Connor offered, taking the carving knife. Time I learned the family technique properly. Watching him carefully slice meat using the same methodical approach my father had taught me, I felt profound completion. 3 generations of wisdom had converged. Experience had defeated manipulation. Family loyalty had overcome deception. You know what I'm most grateful for, Connor said as we sat down. Learning that getting older doesn't mean getting weaker. Dad, watching you outmaneuver Courtney, taught me that experience is the most powerful weapon against exploitation. Beverly raised her wine glass. To family partnerships no one sees coming. As we clinked glasses around our restored table, I reflected on the most important lesson. Age doesn't make us vulnerable. It makes us formidable. 40 years of business experience, 4 decades of marriage, and 67 years of life had given me tools no young predator could match. Looking back on this ordeal, I realize I made a crucial mistake that nearly cost me everything. I trusted blindly without staying vigilant. Don't be like me. Don't assume that family love automatically means family loyalty. Even the people closest to you can be manipulated by desperate circumstances. Betrayal stories like mine are becoming increasingly common in America. These grandpa stories you hear aren't just entertainment. They're warnings. When I share betrayal stories with other seniors, I see the same shock I felt that Thanksgiving night. Too many grandpa stories end tragically because we don't recognize the signs early enough. But here's what I've learned. God gave us wisdom through experience for a reason. The Lord blessed me with 40 years of business instincts that saved my family. And thank God for Beverly's courage. Without her secret recordings, Courtney might have succeeded. The most important lesson from these grandpa stories isn't about being suspicious of everyone. It's about trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. Age brings discernment that no young predator can anticipate. Your gray hair represents decades of learning to read people and situations. Betrayal stories teach us that experience is our greatest defense against those who would exploit us. Don't let anyone convince you that getting older means getting weaker. You've survived decades of challenges that makes you formidable, not vulnerable. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs this warning. Leave a comment below about your own experiences with family manipulation. Your story could save another family. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that matter. Together, we can protect our community's most precious members.